Welcome to the Think Generation Wealth Podcast, episode number 88. And I am your host, Amir Estimo. Thank you very much for tuning in to this podcast today. I'd like to open up with gratitude. You could be doing anything in this world, but the fact you're listening to this podcast is much appreciative. And I hope that today's episode is a great value to you. Leave a 5-star review if you enjoy this content. Rate and review the podcast on any of your platform, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast from. All right, let's jump in today's episode. So today's episode was inspired by a stand-up. Now, I don't remember the stand-up, but Chris Rock had a stand-up. I want to say it was Bigger and Blacker or something to that nature. And I remember he mentioned something. And in this stand-up, he said, there's a difference between rich and wealthy. Okay, because I know this podcast is talking about Think Generational Wealth. He said, okay, the difference, and he brought up an example. The example was, he brought up at the time, Shaquille O'Neal. He said Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq is rich. Now, this was years ago. Shaq is wealthy now. And the guy who signs his check is wealthy. At that moment, I didn't think much of it, right? I said, okay, this was like years ago when he did the stand-up. But most recently, I started thinking, yes, there is a huge difference. There is a difference. I don't know if it's a huge, but there is a difference between the two. So you say, okay, what's the difference? Well, Jeff Bezos is wealthy. Most can agree that Jeff Bezos is wealthy. Why is he wealthy? Well, he has assets. He has assets that can pay him basically for the rest of his life. He owns Amazon. He owns, I think, the Washington Post. I think he owns the space Blue Origin. I think so. Another thing he does. So he owns income producing assets. Someone that's wealthy build their wealth by assets, whether it's stocks, real estate, businesses. Okay. Those things are income producing assets. Now you say, okay, well, someone that's rich, right? Shaquille O'Neal at the time was rich. He wasn't wealthy. Rich is someone who makes their income. So like Shaq at the time makes his money from playing basketball. But if Shaq doesn't play basketball anymore, the question becomes, does he have any income producing assets that's going to pay him? And at that time, probably the answer was no. Now, I don't know Shaq's whole financial situation, but I'm just giving an example. Because in sports, right, these players, they get paid based off if they play. So if you play for X amount of times, years, you will get a check. Now, football is a little different. Football, it's non-guaranteed. You know, you may sign $100 million deal. That's why when you hear these football players get paid, they sign these $100 million deal. Pay attention to what's guaranteed, not what the deal. The deal looks good. $100 million. Yeah. Shaquille O'Neal, or I don't know, somebody, Barry Sanders. I'm just throwing names out there, but just being facetious. Just think of it that way. Signs $100 million deal. You look at it like, man, he signed $100 million deal. But in football, it's not. Out of $100 million, maybe 30, 40 million is guaranteed, right? So you want to keep that in mind. Basketball is different. Basketball, you'll probably get your whole $100 million. But if you're not producing, let's say later on in your careers, or you're just not they do what they call a buyout. So instead of you probably getting your $100 million, you may end up getting 70, So you may not get the whole $100 million. So keep that in mind, right? Now, if they stop playing whatever professional sport they're playing, they don't get a check. You're rich. You may have a rich lifestyle, but they don't get a check. Okay? So if you don't get a check, guess what happens? You have to start spending money. That's not coming in. And if you're spending money that's not coming in, what are you doing? You're reducing your wealth. You're reducing your income. You're reducing. And that's why you see a lot of these athletes, entertainers, they go bankrupt. They have to file for bankruptcy because once that money is not coming in anymore, unless you have income producing assets, the rich title can only hold so long. You could be a millionaire. I was reading a book and it said in in the late 1800s or so, someone who made $1 million was considered wealthy. They were considered wealthy back then. Now, if you make $1 million now, it's not the same as it was in the 1800s because the cost of living has gone up, inflation. So something that probably cost $1 is probably now costing almost $30, $40, right? So you want to keep that in mind when you're thinking about being rich. Some people like, I want to be rich. No, you want to be wealthy. You want to be rich, and that's fine, right? But you want to be wealthy because once you're rich, then you want to go for the wealthy title. Because if you look at Shaquille O'Neal now, he owns businesses, income producing businesses. That's what he owns now. Shaq owns pizzas. He owns, I think he even invested into that company Ring when it first came out. He owns a variety of businesses. So now he owns income producing assets, which means he's not working. He's still getting a check. That's the beauty of it. If you save, let's say you save, you put $5,000 a month in your bank account, right? You put $5,000 a month. Now you have $30,000 extra. So now you have $30,000. That doesn't necessarily mean you're rich. Okay. Here's the kicker. Let's say that $30,000 is paying you $5,000 a month for 6 months, right? That's the key. That's the issue. That's where we don't really see the importance of wealth. Wealth is when you don't have to work and you have your income producing assets paying you. Because now you have your time freedom, right? You are debt free and you don't, at any moment of your life, you can live unless things just go into the gutter. Like in Jeff Bezos' case, unless another company comes and outdoes him and also Amazon goes bank, that's the only way he can lose his wealth. But as long as Amazon is going as a machine as it is, Elon Musk is going as like Tesla, Warren Buffett, so and so on, they don't have to work. They have the time freedom to do what they want to do on their own terms. Now, with being rich, right? You turn around and you see these athletes and entertainers and they rich. Yeah, I'm rich. I'm making a lot of money. You have to constantly work. So if you're an entertainer, you probably have to constantly shoot movies. You got to be gone from your family, right? So you got to be gone from your family. If you're an athlete, you got to constantly play. You may have to play well into years than you didn't want to. Maybe you wanted to retire at a younger age, but maybe because of your money, maybe how you're living your life, you may have to work, you may have to stay longer. Okay? And that's where the issue is people don't realize that when you're rich, it sounds good and all of that, but your lifestyle, what are you doing afterwards with that money to turn it into wealth? Because if you're not making music, you're not shooting basketball, you're not playing football, or you're not shooting movies. And I'm not saying that's the only way to be rich. There's a variety of ways to be rich, but I'm just saying, just kind of giving an example. You don't have nothing coming in. So if you don't have nothing coming in, you got to live on what you have. So if you sign a $100 million contract, and let's say you then turn around and say, okay, I'm gonna go and buy a MC Hammer is a perfect example. I was actually reading about it this morning. MC Hammer, I think he amassed $30 million throughout his whole career. But he ended up filing for bankruptcy later on because he ended up actually being in debt. So can you imagine if you make $1 million a year, but your expenses are $1.2 million? So that means, yeah, you may be rich, but you are in debt. $200,000 difference because of your lifestyle. So if you have an expensive lifestyle, buying expensive cars, there was actually really a story of Vince Young and how he went broke. And I think one of the reasons were he used to go to Chili's, and he was a frequent going to Chili's. And he ended up with his bill at Chili's was $600 every time he went. And that's the thing. That's why you read about these athletes and they go broke. It's because, for one, when you're not financially literate or educated, you're not any of those two things, especially depending on your background, where you come from. Because if someone comes and hands you $10, you didn't have that $10 yesterday, you may be like, dang, I got $10, so, now I can probably go do other stuff with that money. I mean, I'm just giving an example again. I was even watching an episode. I don't know if you guys watch. It was some of the reruns. Mom, the TV show. There was actually an episode. Christy, she was actually mentioning she was being in denial that she had a gambling problem, and I remember she said one of the reasons why she gambles is because when she doesn't have much money coming to her. So when she has the money, it's like a lot to her. So she would go and gamble it. But that's the thing. When you are not financially educated, even if you don't have a lot of money, but when you do have that money, you can go invest it. Okay? Because some of us don't think that. And like when you hear these athletes, again, they go broke, 30 for 30 broke and all that stuff, is because there's a level of education you have to be. And that's why now you're seeing a lot of these athletes now, LeBron James, so on and so on, instead of them blowing their cash, what they're doing is investing. Because they know their career, there's only a short amount of time you're going to play this game. And after that, that's it. Because you're not going to get a check from the NBA every single year. You're not going to get that anymore. Once you retire, it's it. If you don't have things for when you retire, it's going to be tough for you. That's why even for us, who's probably not even athletes or millionaires or all that stuff, if you don't you're not building wealth on the side and you're just collecting a check every single 2 weeks, eventually you're going to retire. And then when you retire, what happens? You don't have no money coming in. And the way to have that is you need to have income producing assets. Okay? Income producing assets. You need to have assets that's paying you while you are not of working or you don't work. That's the luxury of being wealthy. That's the luxury of being wealthy. And sometimes, what we determine wealth. Oh, if you have 100 million, 10 million, 30 million, whatever. I don't know what that means to you, but to me is if I have my time, freedom, I own businesses, I have income producing assets, I don't have to go to a 9-to-5 job, right? I don't have someone telling me what to do and what not to do with my money or my time, then to me, I don't need to have $100 million. I would recommend a book for any of us. And actually, I'm going to go back and read this book again. And because I was actually listening to the YouTube version of it. There was a guy who went over the book in YouTube. It was called The Psychology of Money. And one part he mentioned is you do not want to compare yourselves to someone else. Meaning, I don't want to compare myself to Jeff Bezos. Because Jeff Bezos is different from Amir Estimo. It's different from you. You're not the same. Okay. So you don't want to compare yourself and be like, well, Jeff has that. I want that too. Your circumstance may not allow you to get that far. What if you turn around and only had $10 million? You're wealthy. But that $10 million, let's say you have income producing assets that are paying you, not cash. Okay. Your cash is part of your wealth, but that's just money you have on the side, and you can probably use that money to invest. You know why? I think a lot of times people that are wealthy are more frugal. And there's another book I would probably recommend. So there's two books, Psychology of Money, and then the next book called The Rich Neighbor Next Door or something like that. The Millionaire Next Door. That may be a title. You can read that book too. And it will tell you why people who are wealthy are the most frugal people in the world. Because you don't want to just go blow your wealth. You don't want to. There was actually a story, Dwayne Wade, I remember he was on a podcast, and he said LeBron James is the cheapest person he knows. He says LeBron doesn't even turn on his Wi-Fi. So if he's somewhere, he doesn't even turn on the Wi, or he doesn't use his data, I think it was. So if someone calls, and let's say you're in an area that your location probably is not getting good reception, so you want to, you could take your phone off, or not getting good Wi-Fi, you could take your phone off Wi-Fi and actually use your data. And he says LeBron James would not do that. He would not. Warren Buffett still lives in the same home he bought. And I think it was in the 1950s or something like that. He lives in that same exact home he bought for like $21,000. And he's one of the richest men. He's one of the most wealthiest men in the world. And I'm not saying I'm saying wealthy because Warren Buffett owns businesses. He owns stocks. So he has income producing assets. And that's what we want to get to. We don't want to just be rich. You can be rich and your lifestyle exceeds what you actually have. So if you make let's just say make $100,000 a year, but you have $120,000 lifestyle, it's not going to work. You're not rich. You're in debt. So the key thing is you want to take that $100,000 a year and make sure it pays you something every single month. That's the key to wealth. Income producing assets, lowering your cost of living, meaning accelerating your savings, growing your income, growing your assets. These are the things that are going to be wealth of. These are the advantages for you. Not making $1 million and then having a $1.2 million lifestyle. You do not want to be on the other end of broke or rich, whatever you call that. So if you're rich, you could possibly be broke. Okay. And when you hear about, and it's so sad, we live in a world today where people value, like they let social media, they see stuff on social media sometimes and they're just like, I want that too. Sometimes it's not meant for you. You can go and be wealthy. Anybody can do that. But it takes a level of discipline. It really does, folks. And even me, again, I'm going through it just like you guys are going through it. So don't ever think, for me, I have it together, because I don't. I'm still learning. I am still learning. I told my kids this the other day. I said, I always ask my kids, I say, hey, I don't ask my kids, how was school? I'll probably ask them here and there, but I don't say, how is school? I say, what did you learn today? And that the reason I ask that question, because you can actually, let's say, for example, right? You can go through a day. You can go to school and learn nothing, right? But if you're not learning something new, it could be, hey, I called this company and they taught me something new about my wireless bill. I didn't know that. I was learning something new, right? Maybe learning how to cut the yard, or maybe learning how to change a light bulb, maybe learning how to, I don't know. There's just, it could be the smallest thing in the world. But if you are not learning every single day, you're dying. And I always tell them, hey, how was your day? Yeah, Dad, it was good. What did you learn today? Well, and then they'll go into school, and sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not just talking about school. I'm talking about, what did you learn today? I learned this new route, how to get to class. Boom, that's learning something new, right? Oh, I was talking to this friend, and they were telling me about this, this thing, and boom, you learned something new. You should be learning every single day. And when it comes to wealth, you should be understanding and educating yourself how to build it, because it takes time. Warren Buffett didn't get more of his money, and they say most billionaires or even millionaires become that past their 50s, right? And here I am. I'm thinking, I'm not dating. I don't want to date myself here, but I was thinking the other day, I'm like, man, I'm getting to this certain age, and I'm not. Am I where I exactly want to be at? And the answer is, I told myself the answer is no. But at the end of the day, I know it's going to take time. As long as I'm healthy, living, I can do this. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. Building wealth takes time. Being rich, you can be rich today and then lose it all the next day. Ask someone who won the lottery. Rich. Boom, I'm rich. And the next day they turn around, 5-6 years down the road, they broke, because they didn't understand the value of money. They didn't understand financial education. They didn't understand how to be these things. They just thought it was, okay, I make 100 million. I won the lottery, got 30 million. But then that's when you're coming in, you're living a different lifestyle, but you don't realize you ain't got no money coming in. And if you don't have any money coming in, it's going to be hard to maintain that lifestyle. You got to have money coming in, and you cannot have your expenses exceed your income. That doesn't work. The optics doesn't work. The numbers doesn't work. Okay. And like I said, I'm just like you guys. I'm figuring it out just like you guys. So I'm not here. This one thing when it comes to even doing something in life, and this probably would be my next episode on the podcast, is the imposter syndrome. We all have that. Like, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I start this podcast. What do I know? I'm not rich. I'm not wealthy. I'm not any of that stuff. I'm just a regular guy with kids and a family. I have a corporate job. I have a couple of businesses on the side, but that's it. But I don't. Why would anybody listen to me? What am I going to say that's going to be of value to anyone? And they're going to say, oh, hey, I can follow him. I can follow Amir. And I had to tell myself, I had to get out of my head and say, you know what? There's someone who's in the same position I am. They're learning just like I'm learning. So instead of them scoundering the internet, looking for value, bring this here and centralize this information. And it's up to them what they go do with it. And that's how I feel. That's with you too. Don't let the imposter syndrome stop you from doing whatever because we all create these negative thoughts and, these beliefs, these beliefs, and say, hey man, I can't do this. So why am I going, why, and we keep asking ourselves, why would anybody listen to me? Why would just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just like the commercial Nike say, just do it. Everything else will fall in line. I'll tell you this. I just hit 2,500 downloads on my podcast. And to someone that's like, oh man, 2,500. For someone who's not podcast consistently as often as I want to or should, right? I'm not getting any money from this, but I enjoy talking financial literacy. And it's a way for me to learn, because not only am I sharing, I'm learning. Because there's certain topics that I cover on this podcast, I actually have to go research it. And then I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that. Like the life insurance podcast, the last episode 87, there was some stuff I didn't realize about. I was like, wow, I didn't think of that. I had to learn that. And it gives me an opportunity to learn too, because I think for me is, like I said, you should be learning every single day. And again, whatever you may feel or think, just, hey, I can do this. Again, my podcast, 2,500 downloads. I average about 40 podcast downloads, right? That may seem like that may not seem a lot, but at the end of it, I just think of it as from where I have started to where I'm at now. I just only have 5 downloads. And then when I see the podcast going up like that, I'm appreciative. That means if I was in a room, there would be 40 people listening to me. The only difference is I'm doing it behind the mic, behind a computer, and you actually taking the time and listening to it. I'm no different than you are. So when it comes to wealth, I'm learning about this too. I have to put it in my mind, I don't want to be rich. I want to be wealthy, because I can pass down assets to the next generation. I can't pass my job down. I cannot do that. But I can pass down a business, stocks, to my kids, teach them. So the next generation can have the same information that the generation before them had. But it starts with us and your mindset. It starts here, your mind. And then you work your way down. Okay? I appreciate if you listen to this podcast at its entirety. I am so appreciative of you listening to this podcast, because I truly value anybody's time, because there's two things in this world it's really hard for people to depart with: their time and their money. Now, money, you can get that back. Time, you can. We all have the same. As I'm recording this podcast, what's going on? The time is moving and moving and moving. So anytime anybody listens to this podcast, my goal is for you to walk away. Even if you learn the most minuscule thing on this podcast, hopefully you can take that away and it opens the door for you to go learn more. Because the learning starts with you. The education starts with you. I'm not here to teach you. I'm here to share, but I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. It all starts with you, okay? But if you listen to this podcast, even people are like, man, I didn't know wealthy was this and rich was that. Yes, there is a difference. There is one, okay? So, till next week, much love to you guys. And I'll leave you with this quote. The quote of the day. And the quote is, you'll miss the best things if you keep your eyes shut. Dr. Seuss, actually.